Hey everyone, today we're diving into why you destroy the things you want most. So, get comfortable, maybe grab a coffee or find a quiet spot, and let's ease into this exploration together. Congratulations! You might have just realized that you're your own worst enemy, not in some vague, philosophical sense, in a very specific, documented, clinically observed sense. You're the person who quits the gym the week you start seeing results. You're the one who picks fights with your partner right when things get good. You're sabotaging the job interview you spent months preparing for by showing up late, or hungover, or both. And the worst part, you know you're doing it. You can feel yourself doing it, but you do it anyway. Welcome to self-sabotage, the psychological equivalent of setting your own house on fire and then wondering why you're cold. And before you think this is just about willpower or discipline or some motivational speaker nonsense about wanting it badly enough, let me tell you something. Self-sabotage isn't a character flaw. It's a defense mechanism. Your brain is in fact protecting you. From what, you ask? From success, from happiness, from everything you say you want. And it has very good reasons for doing so, even if those reasons were formed when you were 6 years old and no longer apply to your adult life. Research indicates that self-sabotaging behaviors are surprisingly common. Studies show that procrastination, one of the most prevalent forms of self-sabotage, affects approximately 20% of the adult population. That's 1 in 5 people actively working against their own interests on a regular basis. But here's the thing nobody tells you about self-sabotage. It's not random. It follows patterns, predictable, observable, psychological patterns that have been studied for over a century. Freud wrote about it. Jung explored it. Every therapist worth their license has watched clients do it, week after week, session after session. The good news is, once you understand why you're doing it, you can start to catch yourself. The bad news is, understanding why doesn't automatically make it stop, because self-sabotage isn't happening in your conscious, rational mind. It's happening in the deep, primitive, survival-oriented parts of your brain that don't care about your goals or your potential. And safe, to that part of your brain, means exactly where you are right now. So let's talk about what self-sabotage actually looks like in your daily life. Not the dramatic, obvious kind. The subtle kind. The kind you've been doing for so long you don't even notice it anymore. You procrastinate on the project that could change your career. You tell yourself you work better under pressure, that you need the deadline to motivate you. But what you're really doing is ensuring that even if you fail, you have a built-in excuse. I didn't have enough time. If you had more time, you would have done better. Except, you had time. You had months. You just spent them refreshing social media and reorganizing your desk, and suddenly developing a passionate interest in learning to bake sourdough bread. This is classic self-handicapping behavior, a term first identified by researchers Stephen Berglas and Edward Jones in their groundbreaking work in the 1970 seconds. Their research showed that people with higher self-doubt actively seek external sources of blame when they expect poor results. In their classic experiment, participants who faced unsolvable problems in an initial round were significantly more likely to choose a performance-impairing substance or capsule before the second round. 70% chose the drug, compared to only 13% of those who had solvable problems. They were literally sabotaging themselves to have an excuse for failure. And when asked why they made this choice, the participants rationalized it. They claimed they were trying to help the researchers. This is self-deception at work, making the sabotage feel rational, feel justified, feel like anything other than what it actually is. You pick fights with your partner right when the relationship gets serious. Everything is going well. You're happy. They're talking about moving in together or meeting your parents. And suddenly, you find yourself annoyed by everything they do. The way they chew, the way they laugh, the fact that they breathe too loudly when they sleep. You start arguments over nothing. You withdraw. You become critical. And when they finally get frustrated and pull away, you feel relieved. See, you think, I knew it wouldn't work out, except it was working out. until you made sure it didn't. Research on relationship self-sabotage has identified this as a cognitive strategy employed with the overall aim of self-protection, and it primarily serves the function of self-esteem and self-image safeguard. In other words, you're destroying the relationship to protect yourself from the possibility that it might end anyway. Better to control when and how it ends than to risk being abandoned. Better to confirm your belief that relationships don't work out than to stay vulnerable long enough to find out this one might. Studies using the relationship self-sabotage scale have identified 3 primary self-sabotaging behaviors in romantic relationships: defensiveness, trust, difficulty, and lack of relationship skills. And the research shows that defensiveness is the strongest factor. People sabotage their relationships primarily to protect themselves from perceived threats to their self-worth. You gain back the weight you lost. You were doing so well. Eating right, exercising, feeling good. Then one bad day turns into one cheat meal, which turns into one cheat day, which turns into you're back where you started, maybe heavier, and you tell yourself you just don't have willpower. But willpower isn't the problem. The problem is that losing weight changed how people saw you. They noticed you. They commented on your body. They asked what you were doing differently. And suddenly, you weren't invisible anymore. You weren't safe anymore. So your brain, trying to protect you, guided you right back to where you were comfortable, where you were known, where you were safe. This is your nervous system's homeostatic drive in action. The brain's fundamental need to maintain equilibrium, to keep things the same, even when the same is painful. You avoid applying for jobs you're qualified for. You scroll through job listings, see positions that match your skills perfectly, maybe even positions you're overqualified for, and you don't apply. You tell yourself you're not ready yet. You need one more certification, one more year of experience, one more something. Or you do apply, but you sabotage the interview. You show up unprepared. You undersell yourself. You say something awkward and then fixate on it for the entire conversation. Because if you don't get the job, it's not rejection. It's just bad luck, bad timing, a bad interviewer. Anything except the possibility that you might not be good enough. Better to not try than to try and fail. This protective mechanism keeps your self-concept intact. As long as you don't fully try, you can maintain the belief in your own potential. The moment you try your hardest and fail, that belief shatters. You drink too much the night before something important. You have a big presentation tomorrow, a crucial meeting, a first date with someone you really like. And instead of preparing, instead of resting, you go out drinking, or you stay up too late watching videos, or you eat something you know will make you sick. And then tomorrow, when you perform poorly, when you're exhausted and foggy and not at your best, you have a reason. It wasn't really you failing. It was you tired, you hungover, you unprepared. The real you, the fully rested and focused you, would have done great, except you never let that version of yourself show up. Research on self-handicapping shows that this strategy allows people to protect their self-esteem by creating external attributions for failure while maintaining internal attributions for success. You isolate yourself when you need support. Something difficult is happening in your life. A loss, a setback, a struggle. Your friends reach out. Your family calls. People offer help, want to check in, want to be there for you, and you withdraw. You stop responding to messages. You cancel plans. You tell everyone, you're fine, you just need some space. And then you sit alone in your apartment, scrolling through other people's lives on your phone, feeling abandoned, feeling like nobody cares. Except they did care. They tried. You push them away, because accepting help means admitting you need it, means being vulnerable, means letting people see you at less than your best. And that, to the self-sabotaging part of your brain, is dangerous. You spend money you don't have. You're trying to save, trying to get out of debt, trying to build some financial security, and then you see something you want, not even something you need, just something that makes you feel good in the moment. New clothes, new electronics, a vacation you can't afford, and you buy it. You tell yourself you deserve it. You work hard. You'll figure out the money later. But what you're really doing is keeping yourself financially unstable. Because financial stability means responsibility, means you can't use money as an excuse for why your life isn't where you want it to be. If you had money, you'd have to admit that money wasn't the only thing holding you back. You overshare and then withdraw. You meet someone new, a potential friend, a romantic interest, someone you connect with, and in your excitement, in your hope that this might be different, you tell them everything, all your trauma, all your fears, all your problems. You dump years of emotional baggage onto them in the first few conversations. And then, when you see them pull back, when they need space, when they seem overwhelmed, you take it as confirmation. See, nobody can handle the real you. Nobody sticks around once they know the truth. Except you didn't give them a chance. You overwhelmed them on purpose. You tested them in a way they were guaranteed to fail. Because rejection after oversharing feels safer than rejection after they actually got to know you slowly, naturally, over time. You set impossible standards and then quit when you can't meet them. You decide to start a business, write a book, learn a language, get in shape, and you create this perfect plan. You're going to work on it every single day. You're going to be disciplined and focused and consistent. You're going to become a completely different person starting tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes, and you miss a day, or you don't do it perfectly. And instead of adjusting, instead of accepting that progress isn't linear, you quit. You tell yourself if you can't do it right, you might as well not do it at all. Which is a very convenient way to never have to find out if you could actually succeed. Perfectionism, research shows, is strongly linked to procrastination and self-sabotage, because impossible standards create a perpetual excuse for inaction. These are the patterns. These are the ways self-sabotage shows up in your life. Not with a sign that says, "Hey, I'm about to ruin this for you," but quietly, subtly, dressed up as logic or bad luck or just the way things are. And the reason you keep doing these things, even when you know better, even when you can see the pattern, is because your brain has convinced itself that this behavior is keeping you safe. And in a twisted way, it is. Safe from disappointment, safe from rejection, safe from the terrifying possibility that you might actually get what you want and then have to figure out how to keep it. Now let's talk about why familiar suffering feels safer than unfamiliar happiness. This is the part that sounds insane when you first hear it. You're actively choosing pain over pleasure, struggle over ease, known misery over unknown joy. And yet, when you really examine your behavior, when you really look at the patterns, it's undeniable. You are more comfortable being unhappy in ways you understand than being happy in ways you don't. Research by psychologists Josh and Lou and Weyers has documented what they call aversion to happiness, a phenomenon where people across cultures actively avoid or feel uncomfortable with positive emotions and success. Your brain is designed to prioritize survival over satisfaction. That's not a metaphor. That's neuroscience. The parts of your brain responsible for keeping you alive, the amygdala, the limbic system, the ancient survival mechanisms that kept your ancestors from being eaten by predators, those parts are older, faster, and more powerful than the parts responsible for logic and long-term planning. So when your survival brain detects a threat, it doesn't matter that your logical brain says, "This is good for you, this is what you want." The survival brain wins, every time. And here's the problem. Your survival brain defines threat very broadly. It's not just physical danger. It's anything unfamiliar, anything uncertain, anything that requires you to operate outside the patterns and behaviors that have kept you alive so far, which means success, happiness, positive change. All of these things can register as threats, not because they're actually dangerous, but because they're unknown. You've been depressed for years. It's exhausting. It's painful. You know what that feels like, what it looks like, how to function within it. You've built your entire life around it. Your routines, your relationships, your expectations. And then one day, you start to feel better. Maybe you started therapy. Maybe you got on medication. Maybe you just had a good week. And instead of relief, you feel anxiety because feeling good is unfamiliar. You don't know how to be this person. You don't know if people will still like you if you're not the struggling one, the one who needs help, the one everyone worries about. So without even realizing it, you start doing things that pull you back down. You skip your medication. You stop going to therapy. You pick up the old habits that made you feel bad in the first place. Because feeling bad is home. And your brain always wants to go home. This is what psychologists call homeostasis. Your brain's drive to maintain equilibrium. And it doesn't matter if the equilibrium is healthy or unhealthy. What matters is that it's known. Your brain has spent years, maybe decades, calibrating itself to your current circumstances, your stress levels, your emotional baseline, your sense of self. All of it has been normalized to your current reality. And changing that reality, even changing it for the better, requires a massive recalibration. New neural pathways, new behaviors, new ways of thinking and being. And that takes energy. That creates uncertainty. That feels, to your primitive brain, like danger. You've been single for a long time. You tell everyone you want a relationship. You date. You try. You put yourself out there. And then you meet someone who's actually good for you. Someone kind, stable, emotionally available. And it feels wrong. Not bad wrong, just unfamiliar wrong. They don't create drama. They don't play games. They're just consistently present and caring. And your nervous system, trained on years of chaos and uncertainty, doesn't know what to do with that. So you get bored. You get suspicious. You start looking for problems that don't exist. You create conflict where there isn't any. Or you just ghost them. And then you go back to dating people who are unavailable, inconsistent, emotionally volatile, because that's familiar. That's the pattern your brain knows how to navigate, even if it hurts. You've been broke for as long as you can remember, living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in debt, constantly stressed about money. And then something changes. You get a better job. You start making more. You begin to see a path out. And instead of relief, you feel uncomfortable. You don't know how to be someone who has money. Your family never had money. Your friends don't have money. Your entire identity is built around struggling. So you spend it. You make bad financial decisions. You help people who don't need help. You buy things you don't need. You ensure that you stay exactly where you were. Because poverty might be painful, but it's familiar. And familiarity, to your survival brain, equals safety. This is what your brain is doing when it sabotages your success. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you from the discomfort of change, from the vulnerability of hope, from the risk of disappointment. Better to stay miserable in ways you understand than to be happy in ways you don't. At least in misery, you know what to expect. You know how to cope. You know who you are. And your identity, even a painful identity, feels safer than the unknown. The psychological term for this is the comfort zone. But that's a misleading name. Because it's not actually comfortable. You're not comfortable being depressed, broke, lonely, or stuck. But you're familiar with it. You've adapted to it. You've built survival strategies around it. And leaving it, even leaving it for something better, means dismantling all of those strategies and building new ones, which your brain interprets as a threat to your survival. Research on stress and adaptation shows that even positive life changes, getting married, having a baby, getting promoted, create significant stress because they require adjustment to new circumstances. The Holmes and Rahe stress scale, a widely used tool in psychology, ranks life events by their stress level, and many positive events rank surprisingly high. Getting married is ranked as more stressful than being fired from a job, not because marriage is worse than unemployment, but because it represents a major life change that requires adaptation. And adaptation, to your nervous system, feels like threat. So yes, you're choosing familiar suffering over unfamiliar happiness, not because you're broken, but because your brain is trying to keep you alive. It just doesn't understand that surviving isn't the same as living. Now let's talk about defense mechanisms, because this is where self-sabotage gets really interesting. These are the unconscious strategies your mind uses to protect itself from anxiety, shame, and psychological pain. Sigmund Freud identified them over a century ago, and they're still some of the most powerful forces in human behavior. You use them every day. Everyone does. But when they become your primary way of dealing with reality, they stop protecting you and start imprisoning you. According to psychodynamic theory, defense mechanisms are intrapsychic processes that operate unconsciously to protect the ego from anxiety. Denial is the simplest and most primitive defense mechanism. It's refusing to acknowledge reality. You're not procrastinating. You're just waiting for the right time. You're not drinking too much. You just like to relax after work. You're not sabotaging your relationship. Your partner is just too sensitive. Denial lets you avoid the discomfort of facing the truth. The problem is, reality doesn't care if you acknowledge it or not. The deadline still approaches. The liver damage still accumulates. The relationship still deteriorates. You just don't have to feel bad about it while it's happening, until it's too late to do anything about it. Researchers Baumeister and colleagues have documented that denial is one of the most common defense mechanisms and can lead to significant real-world consequences when people refuse to acknowledge behaviors that are clearly self-destructive. Rationalization is when you create logical-sounding explanations for behavior that's actually driven by emotion or unconscious motives. You didn't sabotage that job interview. You just weren't a good culture fit. You could tell from the way the interviewer looked at you. You're not afraid of commitment. You just value your independence. You haven't met anyone who really gets you yet. You didn't give up on your goals. You just realized they weren't aligned with your authentic self. Rationalization is sophisticated denial. It lets you rewrite the story in a way that protects your ego, that makes you the reasonable one, the one who made the smart choice. But deep down, underneath all that logic, you know you're lying to yourself. You just can't admit it. Studies on cognitive biases show that people are remarkably skilled at constructing narratives that protect their self-image, even in the face of contradictory evidence. Projection is when you attribute your own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or motives to someone else. You're not jealous. Your partner is just acting suspicious. You're not being controlling. They're just not being considerate. You're not afraid of success. Other people just don't want to see you do well. Projection lets you feel things without owning them. It lets you act on impulses without admitting you have them. But it destroys relationships because you're not responding to what's actually happening. You're responding to your own internal landscape that you've projected onto the people around you. And they can feel it. They can feel that you're not seeing them. You're seeing yourself reflected in them. And that's isolating for everyone involved. Research in social psychology has consistently shown that projection is a common defense mechanism that can lead to significant interpersonal conflicts and misunderstandings. Displacement is when you redirect your emotions from the actual source to a safer target. You're furious at your boss, but you can't express that. You need your job, so you come home and snap at your partner. You pick a fight about dishes or laundry or something trivial because they're safe. They won't fire you. Your childhood made you feel powerless, but you can't confront your parents. They did their best. And anyway, it was years ago. So you pick relationships with people you can control. People who trigger those same feelings, but in contexts where you have the power. Displacement lets you express emotion without facing its true source. But it punishes the wrong people, and it ensures you never actually resolve the original wound. Studies on emotional regulation show that displacement is a maladaptive coping strategy that perpetuates unresolved emotional issues. Regression is when you revert to childlike patterns of behavior when you're stressed or threatened. You stop taking care of yourself. You become helpless, passive, waiting for someone to rescue you. You throw tantrums. You pout. You manipulate through weakness. Regression is comfortable because it worked when you were a child. When you were little and genuinely helpless, being small and needy got you attention, care, protection. But as an adult, regression keeps you dependent. It keeps you from developing the skills and resilience you need to actually handle your life. And it frustrates the people who care about you because they see your potential. They see that you're capable, but you keep making yourself small. Keep making yourself helpless. Keep waiting to be saved. Reaction formation is when you express the opposite of what you actually feel because the real feeling is too threatening. You're terrified of intimacy, so you become overly sexual, turning connection into performance. You feel worthless, so you become grandiose, arrogant, acting like you're better than everyone. You want help desperately, so you become aggressively independent, refusing assistance even when you need it. Reaction formation lets you hide your vulnerability even from yourself. But it's exhausting because you're constantly performing, constantly maintaining this false self. And the more you perform, the more disconnected you become from what you actually feel and need. Psychodynamic research has shown that reaction formation is particularly common in individuals with rigid or punitive superegos who cannot tolerate certain feelings or impulses. Intellectualization is when you avoid feeling by thinking. You analyze your problems endlessly. You read every self-help book, listen to every podcast, understand every psychological concept. You can explain exactly why you self-sabotage. You can cite studies, quote experts, but you don't change, because understanding isn't the same as healing. And thinking about your feelings isn't the same as feeling them. Intellectualization gives you the illusion of progress. You're doing something, you're learning, you're growing, but you're not. You're just building more sophisticated ways to avoid the actual emotional work. Research on therapeutic change has consistently shown that insight alone, without emotional processing and behavioral change, rarely leads to lasting transformation. Compartmentalization is when you separate conflicting thoughts, feelings, or behaviors into different mental boxes, so you don't have to deal with the contradiction. You're a good person who helps friends and donates to charity, but in this one area of your life, with this one person, you're cruel, and you don't let yourself see the connection. You value health and wellness, but you also binge drink every weekend, and somehow those two truths live side by side without touching. Compartmentalization lets you avoid cognitive dissonance, lets you maintain a positive self-image, even when your behavior contradicts it, but it creates a fragmented self. You become different people in different contexts, and none of them are fully real. These defense mechanisms, all of them, are forms of self-sabotage. They protect you from feeling pain in the moment, but they prevent you from actually dealing with the source of that pain. They keep you stuck, keep you repeating the same patterns, keep you destroying the things you want, because facing why you want them and why you're afraid to have them is too threatening to your sense of self. And the cruelest part is, you can't just stop using them because they're unconscious. By the time you realize you're rationalizing or projecting or denying, you've already done it. The defense is already in place. Awareness helps. Therapy helps. But even with awareness, even with support, you'll catch yourself mid-defense and think, I'm doing it again. And then you have to make the harder choice. To put down the defense, to feel what you're avoiding feeling, to sit with the discomfort. And that's terrifying, because the defenses exist for a reason. They're protecting something vulnerable. And choosing to be vulnerable, consciously, deliberately, feels like choosing to be hurt. But here's what they don't tell you about defense mechanisms. The pain you're avoiding by using them doesn't go away. It accumulates. It builds pressure. And eventually, it comes out anyway, just not in the way you can control. It comes out as depression, as anxiety, as rage you don't understand, as relationships that keep failing for reasons you can't quite name, as a life that looks fine on the surface, but feels hollow underneath. The only way through is to feel it, to face what you're defending against. And yes, it hurts, but it hurts clean. It hurts, and then it's done. Unlike the dull, persistent ache of avoiding it forever. Let's talk about the core belief that drives almost all self-sabotage. The belief that lives so deep, you might not even know it's there. But it colors every decision, every relationship, every attempt at change. The belief that you are fundamentally unworthy, not unworthy of this specific thing. Unworthy, period. Unworthy of love, of success, of happiness, of taking up space in the world. This is the wound underneath all the defense mechanisms. And it's so painful that your entire personality has organized itself around never having to look at it directly. According to attachment theory, early experiences with caregivers shape our internal working models of relationships and self-worth, and insecure attachment patterns can lead to deep-seated beliefs of unworthiness. This belief doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from childhood, not necessarily from abuse or neglect, though those certainly create it. Sometimes it comes from subtler things, from parents who loved you but were distracted, overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, from being compared to siblings who seemed to do everything right, from being praised only for achievements, never for just existing, from 1,000 small moments where you learned that love was conditional, that your value was something you had to earn, that you, as you are, were not enough. Researchers have found that children who experience inconsistent caregiving or emotional neglect are more likely to develop insecure attachment styles and low self-esteem, which persist into adulthood and influence relationship patterns and self-perception. Children's brains are egocentric, not in the sense of being selfish, but in the sense that they interpret everything as being about them. If your parent was depressed, you didn't think, "My parent is struggling with their own mental health." You thought, "I'm not good enough to make them happy." If your parent was angry, you didn't think, "My parent has poor emotional regulation." You thought, "I did something wrong. I'm bad." If your parent was absent, physically or emotionally, you didn't think, "My parent has their own issues, preventing them from being present." You thought, "I'm not worth staying for. I'm not worth their attention." And those thoughts, repeated over years, became beliefs, became the foundation of your self-concept. And here's the insidious part. Those beliefs are trying to protect you. If you believe you're unworthy, then rejection doesn't hurt as much. It's not personal. It's just confirmation of what you already knew. If you believe you're unworthy, then you don't have to risk disappointment. You already expect to fail, expect to be abandoned, expect things not to work out. And expectations, even painful ones, feel safer than hope. Because hope requires vulnerability, requires admitting you want something, requires the possibility that you might not get it. So, you self-sabotage. Because if you're unworthy anyway, if you're going to fail and be rejected and end up alone, you might as well control when and how it happens. You might as well be the one to pull the trigger. At least then it's your choice. At least then you're not passively waiting for the inevitable. You're making it happen on your terms. And there's a twisted sense of power in that. A feeling of control, even if what you're controlling is your own destruction. This is what therapists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe you're unworthy, so you behave in ways that ensure you'll be treated as unworthy. You push people away. You don't try. You settle for less than you deserve. And then when people leave, when you fail, when you end up exactly where you feared you would, you take it as confirmation. See, I was right. I am unworthy. And the belief gets stronger. The evidence accumulates. And it becomes harder and harder to imagine a different possibility. Research on self-concept and behavior shows that people's beliefs about themselves strongly influence their actions, creating feedback loops that reinforce existing self-perceptions, whether positive or negative. But here's what you need to understand. That belief isn't true. It never was. It was a story a child's brain created to make sense of circumstances they couldn't control. It was an attempt to find agency in powerlessness. If I'm unworthy, then my parents' behavior makes sense. It's not random. It's not out of my control. It's because of something about me. And if it's because of something about me, then maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can become worthy. Maybe I can earn the love I need. Except you couldn't, because the problem was never you. The problem was that you were a child who needed things that the adults around you, for whatever reason, couldn't consistently provide. And that's tragic. But it's not your fault. And it's not evidence of your unworthiness. It's evidence that you were a vulnerable human being in an imperfect situation. Nothing more, nothing less. But that belief, that core sense of unworthiness, doesn't respond to logic. You can know, intellectually, that it's not true. You can understand exactly where it came from and why it's wrong. And it won't matter, because it's not stored in the logical part of your brain. It's stored in the emotional, somatic, implicit memory systems. It's in your body, in your nervous system, in the automatic reactions you have before thought even occurs. So changing it isn't about convincing yourself you're worthy. It's about building new experiences that contradict the old belief. It's about staying in relationships when they get good instead of sabotaging them. About accepting compliments instead of deflecting them. About trying for things you want instead of disqualifying yourself before you start. And every time you do those things, every time you act as if you're worthy, even when you don't feel it, you're creating new evidence, new neural pathways, new possibilities. It's slow, it's uncomfortable. There will be days when the old belief feels absolutely true, when you're convinced you've been fooling everyone and they're about to figure out who you really are. But you keep going. You keep acting as if you deserve good things, as if you're allowed to take up space, as if your needs and wants and feelings matter. And gradually, so gradually, you might not notice it happening, the belief starts to loosen, starts to become less automatic, starts to feel more like an old story than an absolute truth. Now let's talk about the fear that might be even stronger than the fear of failure. The fear of success, of visibility, of actually getting what you want and having to figure out what to do with it. This is the fear that makes no logical sense. You've been working toward this goal for years. You've sacrificed for it, planned for it, told everyone it's what you want. And then, right when it's within reach, you panic. Not because you might fail, but because you might succeed. And success, it turns out, is terrifying. Research on achievement motivation has identified that for some individuals, fear of success can be as powerful as, or even more powerful than fear of failure, particularly among those with low self-esteem or perfectionistic tendencies. Success means responsibility. When you're struggling, when you're the underdog, when you're still trying, people expect less of you. They're rooting for you. They're sympathetic. They cut you slack. But the moment you succeed, the expectations change. Now you're supposed to know what you're doing, supposed to handle things, supposed to maintain this new level. And what if you can't? What if this success was a fluke? What if you got lucky and now you're going to be exposed as someone who doesn't belong here, who isn't actually that talented or smart or capable, who just happened to be in the right place at the right time? This is imposter phenomenon, and it's one of the primary drivers of self-sabotage among successful people. The term was first coined by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978 to describe high-achieving individuals who, despite external evidence of their competence, remained convinced that they were frauds. It's commonly referred to today as imposter syndrome. You achieve something, and instead of pride, you feel terror, because now people have expectations. Now there's further to fall. Now you have something to lose. And the only way to not lose it is to get rid of it before anyone figures out you didn't deserve it in the first place. So you self-sabotage. You make careless mistakes. You stop trying as hard. You create chaos. And when it all falls apart, you feel relieved. See, you think, I knew I wasn't good enough. At least now I don't have to keep pretending. Success means visibility. When you're invisible, you're safe. Nobody's watching. Nobody's judging. Nobody's waiting for you to fail. But success puts you in the spotlight. People notice you, have opinions about you, compare themselves to you, and some of them, because humans are complicated and often petty, will resent you, will want you to fail, will actively or passively try to bring you down. And your nervous system, calibrated for survival, interprets that attention as danger, interprets visibility as vulnerability. Because throughout most of human history, being noticed meant being a target. Standing out from the group meant risking exile. Drawing attention meant inviting conflict. So your brain, still operating on ancient programming, tries to protect you by making you small again, invisible again, safe again. Success means outgrowing your reference group. You grew up in a family or community where success wasn't the norm, where people struggled, where being too ambitious was seen as betrayal, as thinking you're better than everyone else. And you absorbed that. Absorbed the message that success means leaving people behind. That achievement creates distance, that if you get too far ahead, you'll lose your connection to the people you love. So you stay stuck. Not because you don't want more, but because wanting more feels like betraying your origins. And that loyalty, that fear of leaving people behind, is powerful enough to override ambition. Powerful enough to make you sabotage opportunities that would change your life. Because changing your life means changing who you are. And if you change too much, will the people who knew you before still recognize you, still accept you, still love you? Success means having to sustain it. Failure is finite. You try, you fail, it's over. But success is ongoing. You have to keep performing at this level, keep producing results, keep living up to what you've achieved. And that's exhausting. The pressure never ends. There's no finish line where you get to relax and say, okay, I made it. I'm done now. Success just opens the door to new expectations, new challenges, new ways to potentially fail. And sometimes, self-sabotage feels like mercy, like finally getting to rest. Because if you destroy it yourself, at least you don't have to keep carrying the weight. Success means redefining your identity. You've spent years, maybe your entire life, thinking of yourself as the struggling artist, the aspiring entrepreneur, the person who's going to make it someday. That identity is familiar. You know how to be that person. You know how to talk about your struggles, how to bond with other people who are also trying to make it, how to explain why your life isn't where you want it to be yet. But if you actually succeed, you have to let that identity go. You have to become someone who made it. And what if that person is boring? What if you have nothing to talk about anymore? What if all your friendships were built on shared struggle, and now you don't have that anymore? What if success isolates you, makes you different, makes you someone you don't recognize? This is why lottery winners often end up broke within a few years. Research has shown that a significant percentage of lottery winners declare bankruptcy within 5 years. Why celebrities self-destruct at the height of their fame. Why people who finally achieve their dreams sometimes fall apart. Because they weren't prepared for success. They thought success would solve everything. But success just brings a different set of problems. And if you don't have the psychological infrastructure to handle those problems, your brain will do what it does best. It will bring you back to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is failure. The fear of success is really a fear of the unknown. Failure is known. You've failed before. You know how to handle it, how to cope with it, how to tell yourself stories about it. But success, real success, is uncharted territory. And humans, for all our aspirations and ambitions, are deeply uncomfortable with the unknown. We prefer known suffering to unknown happiness. We prefer familiar failure to unfamiliar success. Because at least in the familiar, we know who we are, so we sabotage. We pull back right before the finish line. We create problems where there weren't any. We find ways to ensure that we stay exactly where we are. Because where we are, however painful, is at least predictable. And predictability, to a brain that's trying to keep us alive, feels like safety. Now let's talk about secondary gains. These are the hidden benefits you get from staying stuck. The reasons, usually unconscious, that part of you doesn't actually want to solve the problem you keep complaining about. This is one of the hardest things to accept about self-sabotage, because it means admitting that you're getting something out of your suffering, that you're invested, at some level, in keeping things exactly as they are, and that feels wrong. It feels like blaming yourself, like saying your pain is your fault. But it's not about fault. It's about understanding the full picture. about recognizing that human psychology is complex and contradictory, and that you can simultaneously want something and be terrified of having it. Attention and sympathy are powerful secondary gains. When you're struggling, people care. They check in. They offer support. They tell you they're thinking of you. They validate your pain. And that feels good. Not in a superficial way, in a deep, human way. Because we all need to be seen, need to know we matter. And sometimes, struggle is the most reliable way to ensure that people pay attention. So even though you say you want to get better, even though you genuinely hate being depressed or anxious or stuck, there's a part of you that knows that getting better means people will stop checking in, stop offering support, stop seeing you as someone who needs care. And that's scary. Because what if they only cared because you were struggling? What if you're not interesting enough, lovable enough, valuable enough, without the struggle? Research on help-seeking behavior and social support has shown that people can become dependent on the attention they receive when struggling, making it psychologically difficult to relinquish the struggling role. Avoiding responsibility is another major secondary gain. If you're always struggling, always barely keeping your head above water, people don't expect much from you. You get a pass on things. You don't have to take risks because you're too busy dealing with your issues. You don't have to push yourself because everyone agrees you're already dealing with enough. And there's comfort in that. In having a built-in excuse for why you're not living up to your potential. Your potential is still there, still intact, still possible. You just can't access it right now because of circumstances. And as long as you maintain those circumstances, you never have to find out if your potential is real. Never have to risk discovering that maybe you're not as talented or capable or destined for greatness as you've always believed. Maintaining a victim identity can be a secondary gain. Now, this doesn't mean you weren't actually victimized. You might have been. Trauma is real. Injustice is real. But there's a difference between being a victim of circumstances and building your entire identity around victimhood. When you're the victim, you're always right. Nothing is your fault. You have the moral high ground. People owe you consideration, patience, special treatment, and giving that up, taking responsibility for your life, even after terrible things have happened to you, feels like letting people off the hook, like saying what happened to you didn't matter. So you stay in the victim role. You keep the wound open. You build your life around what was done to you, rather than who you could become, despite it. And part of you knows that moving on would mean losing this identity, this explanation for everything wrong in your life, this community of other people who understand, and you're not ready to lose that yet. Control through predictability is a secondary gain. When you keep yourself in a predictable pattern, even a destructive one, you know what to expect. You know how to navigate it. You've developed coping mechanisms, survival strategies, a whole way of being that works within this framework. And changing it, even changing it for the better, means entering uncertainty, means not knowing how things will unfold, means giving up the illusion of control that comes from understanding your own dysfunction. Better to stay in a situation you hate but understand than to risk a situation you might love but can't predict. Research on anxiety and control has consistently shown that people often prefer predictable negative outcomes over unpredictable positive ones. Because predictability provides a sense of control, the comfort of potential is a huge secondary gain. As long as you're still trying, still struggling, still working toward the goal, you get to maintain the fantasy of what you could be if everything aligned perfectly. If you had more time, more money, more support, better circumstances, then you'd show everyone what you're really capable of. But if you actually try, if you actually put yourself out there and give it everything you have, you risk finding out that you're not what you imagined, that your best might not be good enough, and that's devastating. So you stay in potential. You keep the fantasy alive by never fully testing it. You self-sabotage to maintain the comforting belief that you could succeed if you really wanted to, if things were different, if you tried harder. You just haven't yet, but you could. Someday. Maybe. These secondary gains are why change is so hard. Because change isn't just about stopping the destructive behavior. It's about giving up whatever that behavior was providing. And until you find healthier ways to get those needs met, ways to feel seen and cared for that don't require suffering, ways to deal with uncertainty that don't require control, ways to protect your self-worth that don't require keeping yourself small, you're going to keep sabotaging because you're not actually ready to let go of what the sabotage is giving you. This isn't about judging yourself for having secondary gains. Everyone has them. It's just about getting honest, about looking at your patterns and asking, what am I getting from this? What would I lose if I actually solved this problem? What needs is this dysfunction meeting? And then, slowly, intentionally, finding other ways to meet those needs, ways that don't require you to stay stuck. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance and how it drives self-sabotage. Cognitive dissonance, a theory developed by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1957, is the psychological discomfort you feel when you hold contradictory beliefs or when your behavior contradicts your self-concept. Your brain hates dissonance. It craves consistency, coherence. And when something threatens that story, your brain will do almost anything to eliminate the dissonance, including sabotaging the very things you say you want. In his groundbreaking work, Festinger proposed that when people experience inconsistency among their cognitions, they experience psychological discomfort that motivates them to reduce the inconsistency and achieve consonance. You believe you're a good person. That's core to your identity. You help people. You care about social justice. You donate to charity. But you also treat your partner badly. You're critical, dismissive, sometimes cruel. These two truths can't coexist comfortably. So your brain has to resolve the dissonance. And it has three options: change your behavior, change your belief about yourself, or change your belief about your partner. Changing your behavior is hard. It requires acknowledging you've been wrong, apologizing, doing the difficult work of being better. Changing your belief about yourself is even harder. That would mean admitting you're not as good as you thought, that you're capable of cruelty, that your self-image has been a lie. So you choose the third option. You change your belief about your partner. You decide they deserve it. They're too sensitive. They provoke you. They're not really that great anyway. And now the dissonance is gone. Your behavior makes sense. You're still a good person. They're just difficult. And you've just used cognitive dissonance to justify continued mistreatment and ensure the relationship will eventually fail. Research on cognitive dissonance has consistently shown that people will go to great lengths to maintain consistency in their self-concept, often by distorting their perception of reality rather than acknowledging uncomfortable truths about themselves. You believe you're intelligent and capable. You've always been told you have potential. You did well in school. People expect great things from you, but you're not actually accomplishing anything. You're underemployed, underachieving, stuck. This creates dissonance. Either you're not as capable as you thought, or something external is preventing you from succeeding. And your brain will do anything to avoid the first option. So it finds external explanations. The system is rigged. Successful people just got lucky. You're too creative for traditional success. You're not a sellout like everyone else. And you stop trying. Because, as long as you're not trying, you can maintain the belief that you could succeed if you wanted to. That your lack of achievement is a choice, not a reflection of your ability. And the dissonance is resolved. You're still intelligent and capable. You've just chosen not to participate in a corrupt system. And you've used cognitive dissonance to rationalize giving up on your goals. You believe you want a relationship. You tell your friends you're lonely. You date. You put effort in. You say you're looking for something serious. But every time you start to get close to someone, you pull away. You find something wrong with them. You get scared. You sabotage it. This creates dissonance. You say you want connection, but your behavior says the opposite. So your brain resolves it. You decide you haven't met the right person yet. The people you've dated have all had fundamental flaws that justified ending things. You're not afraid of intimacy. You just have high standards, and the dissonance is resolved. You still want a relationship. You're just waiting for someone worthy, and you've used cognitive dissonance to avoid examining your fear of vulnerability. This is how cognitive dissonance drives self-sabotage. Your self-concept is sacred. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are. And when reality threatens that story, when your behavior or circumstances contradict your identity, your brain doesn't change the story. It changes reality, or at least your perception of it. It finds explanations that preserve your self-image. And those explanations, those rationalizations, those cognitive distortions, they keep you stuck. They prevent you from seeing the truth, from acknowledging that maybe you're not who you thought you were. Or maybe you are, but you're also contradictory and human and capable of both kindness and cruelty, both ambition and fear, both wanting and sabotaging. In Festinger's famous experiment, participants who were paid $1 to lie about a boring task being interesting later rated the task as more enjoyable than those paid $20. The participants paid only $1 experienced cognitive dissonance between their behavior and their true feelings, and resolved it by changing their attitude about the task. Those paid $20 had sufficient external justification for lying and experienced less dissonance. This demonstrates how people will change their beliefs to maintain consistency with their behavior, even when the behavior was chosen under minimal pressure. The way out of cognitive dissonance isn't to resolve it, it's to tolerate it. To sit with the discomfort of holding contradictory truths. To accept that you're a good person who sometimes does bad things. That you're intelligent and also scared. That you want connection and are also terrified of it. That you're not one thing, you're complicated. And complications, contradictions, paradoxes, these aren't problems to solve. They're the nature of being human. But your brain doesn't want to accept that. It wants a simple story, a coherent identity, and it will sabotage anything that threatens that coherence. So you have to train yourself to sit with dissonance, to notice when you're rushing to resolve it, to justify your behavior, to change your perception of reality, to protect your ego. And instead of rushing, you pause. You sit with it. You let it be uncomfortable. You acknowledge both truths. I hurt my partner, and I'm still a worthwhile person. I'm capable, and I'm also scared of failure. I want intimacy, and I'm also afraid of it. And in that space, in that willingness to hold contradictory truths, change becomes possible. Because you're not defending anymore. You're not protecting a false image. You're just being honest about all of who you are. And from that honesty, you can actually choose different behavior, not because you've resolved the dissonance, but because you've made peace with it. Now let's talk about attachment patterns and how they show up as self-sabotage in relationships. Your attachment style, formed in early childhood based on how your caregivers responded to your needs, becomes the template for how you relate to people for the rest of your life. And if that template is insecure, if you learn that love is unreliable or conditional or dangerous, you'll spend your adult life sabotaging the very connections you desperately want. Attachment theory, first developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth through her strange situation experiments in the 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds, has become one of the most influential frameworks for understanding relationship patterns. In Ainsworth's groundbreaking research, she observed how infants responded to separation from and reunion with their mothers. Children who had warm, responsive mothers could easily self-soothe and reconnect when their mother returned. Children with cold, dismissive mothers were likewise distant and emotionally detached. They didn't seem to care that their mother had come back. And mothers who acted unpredictably had children who were anxious, aggressive, clingy, and angry. These three behavioral patterns form the basis of attachment styles: secure, avoidant, and anxious. Anxious attachment develops when caregivers are inconsistent. Sometimes they're there, warm, and responsive. Sometimes they're not. As a child, you can't predict when you'll get the love and attention you need, so you become hypervigilant. You learn to constantly monitor for signs of abandonment. You become clingy, demanding, always seeking reassurance, because you learned that love is unstable, that people leave, that you have to work hard, be perfect, be needed, in order to keep them around. And as an adult, this plays out as self-sabotage. You meet someone who actually wants to be with you, who's consistent and caring, and instead of relaxing into that security, you panic. You test them, you pick fights to see if they'll stay, you become needy and demanding, not because you actually need that much reassurance, but because you need to know that even at your worst, even when you're difficult, they won't leave. And eventually, they do leave, because being tested constantly is exhausting, because nobody can provide enough reassurance to fill a wound that deep. And when they leave, you take it as confirmation. See, everyone leaves. I knew they would. And you miss the part where you pushed them away, where your anxiety about abandonment created the abandonment you feared. Research has shown that individuals with anxious attachment are more prone to relationship sabotage through behaviors like excessive reassurance seeking and creating conflicts to test their partner's commitment. Avoidant attachment develops when caregivers are emotionally unavailable or rejecting. You learned early that expressing needs leads to disappointment or criticism, that depending on people is unsafe, that the only way to protect yourself is to not need anyone. So you became self-reliant. You learned to suppress your emotions, to not ask for help, to convince yourself you're better off alone. And as an adult, this plays out as self-sabotage. You meet someone who wants to get close, who wants intimacy, vulnerability, emotional connection, and it terrifies you, so you pull away. You keep them at arm's length. You criticize them for being too needy when really they're just asking for normal relationship things like time together and emotional availability. You pick people who are unavailable, who won't push for closeness, who let you maintain your walls, or you ghost people when things get serious. You create distance through work, through hobbies, through picking fights about their flaws. Because closeness feels like suffocation, feels like losing yourself, feels like depending on someone who will inevitably let you down. So you ensure that relationships never progress past a certain point. You self-sabotage to maintain your independence, to prove you don't need anyone, and then you wonder why you're lonely. Studies have demonstrated that avoidant attachment is actually a stronger predictor of relationship sabotage than anxious attachment, as evidenced by research showing that individuals with avoidant attachment style are more likely to engage in relationship, self-defeating attitudes and behaviors. Disorganized attachment is the most painful. It develops when caregivers are the source of both comfort and fear. Maybe they were abusive. Maybe they were dealing with their own trauma and would oscillate between being loving and being terrifying. You learned that the people who are supposed to keep you safe are also the ones who hurt you. So you never developed a coherent strategy for getting your needs met. You simultaneously crave closeness and fear it. You want to trust, but you can't. You come close, and then you run. You idealize people, and then you demonize them. And as an adult, this creates chaos. You sabotage relationships through a push-pull dynamic that's confusing for everyone involved, including you. You love your partner intensely one day and want to leave them the next. You're terrified of being alone and also terrified of being trapped. You create drama because crisis feels more familiar than stability. You test people in extreme ways, pushing them to their limits because you need to know if they'll stay even when you're at your worst. And usually, they won't, because the chaos is too much. And you take it as confirmation that love is dangerous, that you're unlovable, that you were right to be afraid. Research using the relationship self-sabotage scale has shown that insecure attachment styles are significantly associated with self-sabotaging behaviors in relationships, with defensiveness, trust, difficulty, and lack of relationship skills emerging as the three primary factors. These attachment patterns are self-sabotage machines. They're strategies you developed as a child to cope with caregivers who couldn't meet your needs. And they made sense then. They helped you survive. But as an adult, they're ensuring that you recreate the exact dynamics you're trying to escape. If you're anxiously attached, you push people away with your neediness, while desperately trying to pull them close. If you're avoidantly attached, you ensure that you never experience the intimacy you secretly crave. If you're disorganized, you create chaos that confirms your belief that love is dangerous. The research is clear on this. The way people arrive at relationship sabotage is best demonstrated in a circular manner. While insecure attachment leads to self-sabotage, sabotaging relationships reinforces existing attachment styles and also modifies them. The way out isn't to find the perfect partner who can handle your attachment style. The way out is to recognize the pattern, to understand that your nervous system is reacting to past wounds, not present reality. To notice when you're testing someone, or distancing, or creating drama, and to pause, to ask yourself, am I responding to this person, or am I responding to my history? And then, consciously, deliberately, to choose a different response, to sit with the anxiety without testing, to lean into the intimacy even though it's uncomfortable, to create stability even though chaos feels more familiar. And over time, with a partner who's patient and with probably a lot of therapy, you can develop a secure attachment. You can learn that love doesn't have to be unpredictable or suffocating or dangerous, that you can be yourself with all your needs and vulnerabilities and still be loved. But first, you have to stop sabotaging, stop testing, stop running, stop creating the very things you're afraid of. So how do you actually stop self-sabotaging? This is the part where I'd love to give you a simple 5-step process that will fix everything. But self-sabotage isn't a problem with a solution. It's a pattern with a history, and changing it takes time, patience, and a willingness to sit with discomfort that most people will do almost anything to avoid. Awareness is the first step, but it's not enough. You probably already know you self-sabotage. You can probably identify the patterns. You procrastinate. You push people away. You give up right before success. You know, but knowing doesn't stop it. Because self-sabotage happens in the moment when you're triggered, when you're scared, when your nervous system kicks into survival mode and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, goes offline. So awareness has to become real-time awareness. You have to catch yourself in the moment. You have to notice the urge to sabotage as it's happening, not hours or days later when you're reflecting on why you did it again. And that takes practice. It takes slowing down. It takes paying attention to your body because your body knows you're about to sabotage before your mind does. Your heart rate increases. Your chest tightens. You feel restless or numb or suddenly exhausted. These are signals. And if you can catch them, if you can notice that you're activated, you have a chance to make a different choice. Identify your specific triggers. Self-sabotage doesn't happen randomly. It happens in response to specific situations. For some people, it's when things are going too well. For others, it's when they're about to be seen or evaluated. For others, it's when intimacy increases. You need to know your triggers. When do you sabotage? What's happening right before? What are you feeling? What are you afraid of? And once you know your triggers, you can prepare for them. You can expect them. You can tell yourself, okay, things are going really well right now, which means I'm probably going to feel the urge to sabotage. And when that urge comes, I'm not going to act on it. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to let it be there without letting it control my behavior. Sit with the discomfort instead of acting on it. This is the hardest part, because the urge to sabotage is your brain trying to relieve anxiety, trying to regain control, trying to return to what's familiar. And when you don't act on it, when you just sit there, feeling the anxiety without doing anything about it, it's excruciating. Every part of you wants to fix it, to make it stop, to do the thing that will relieve the tension. But that thing is the sabotage. So you have to build your tolerance for discomfort. You have to practice sitting with anxiety, with uncertainty, with the feeling that something bad is going to happen, without doing anything to make it go away. And the weird thing is, if you can sit with it long enough, it usually does go away on its own, not immediately. It might take 10 minutes or an hour or a day, but it passes. The urge to sabotage passes, and you didn't act on it. and nothing terrible happened. And that's data. That's your brain learning that discomfort isn't dangerous, that you can survive uncertainty, that you don't have to sabotage to stay safe. Research on distress tolerance, a key component of dialectical behavior therapy developed by Marsha Linehan, has shown that building the capacity to withstand uncomfortable emotions without acting on them is crucial for breaking destructive behavioral patterns. Build tolerance for success gradually. You can't go from self-sabotage to sustained success overnight. Your nervous system can't handle it. So you start small. You let something go well. Just one thing. Just for a little while. You get a compliment, and instead of deflecting it, you say thank you and let yourself feel good for 5 minutes. You have a good day with your partner, and instead of picking a fight, you let it be good. You succeed at something small, and instead of dismissing it or immediately creating a new problem, you acknowledge it. You practice holding success in small doses, and gradually, your nervous system learns that success isn't dangerous, that being happy isn't a precursor to disaster, that you can have good things and keep them. Get therapy. Seriously. Self-sabotage is deep. It's rooted in childhood attachment, in core beliefs formed before you had language, in nervous system dysregulation that you can't think your way out of. A good therapist can help you understand your patterns, identify your triggers, process the old wounds that are driving the sabotage. They can help you build new skills for emotion regulation, distress tolerance, self-compassion. They can be the secure attachment figure you never had, the person who stays even when you're difficult, who sees your potential even when you're sabotaging, who believes you can change even when you don't. Therapy isn't weakness. It's acknowledging that you can't do this alone, that you need help rewiring patterns that were set before you could even remember. And that's wise. That's brave. Research on therapeutic outcomes consistently shows that psychotherapy is effective for addressing self-defeating patterns, with approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy showing particular efficacy. Practice self-compassion instead of self-criticism. When you sabotage, your instinct is probably to beat yourself up about it, to call yourself an idiot, to wonder what's wrong with you, to feel shame. But shame is what keeps the pattern going. Shame makes you feel so bad about yourself that you need to escape that feeling. And the way you've always escaped painful feelings is through self-sabotage. So the shame actually perpetuates the cycle. What breaks the cycle is compassion, is recognizing that you sabotaged because you were scared, because you're trying to protect yourself, because you learned a long time ago that this was how to stay safe. And you can acknowledge that the sabotage isn't working anymore, that it's creating problems instead of solving them, without hating yourself for it. You can say, I did this thing that hurt me, and I understand why, and I'm going to try to do differently next time. And that gentleness, that understanding, creates space for change, because you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're working with yourself. Research by Kristin Neff and others on self-compassion has demonstrated that treating oneself with kindness and understanding in the face of mistakes and failures is associated with greater psychological resilience and more adaptive behavior change compared to self-criticism. Expect relapses and don't let them define you. You're going to sabotage again, even after you've done all this work, even after you think you've figured it out. You're going to have a bad day or a triggering situation, and you're going to fall back into the old pattern, and that's normal. That's not failure. That's part of the process. The goal isn't to never sabotage again. The goal is to sabotage less frequently, less intensely, and to recover more quickly, to catch yourself sooner, to be kinder to yourself when it happens. Change isn't linear. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps back. But as long as you keep trying, as long as you don't give up on yourself, you're moving in the right direction. Build a life that's worth not sabotaging. This might sound backwards, but sometimes the reason you keep sabotaging is because the life you're building isn't actually what you want. You're pursuing goals that someone else set for you, or that you think you should want, or that would prove something to people who hurt you. but they're not your goals. So part of you keeps sabotaging because part of you knows that succeeding at something you don't actually want is a different kind of failure. So get honest about what you want, not what you should want, what you actually want. What would make you feel alive? What would make you excited to get up in the morning? And start building that, because it's a lot harder to sabotage something you genuinely care about. It's a lot easier to sit with the discomfort of success when the success actually matters to you. The truth is, stopping self-sabotage isn't about fixing yourself. You're not broken. You're adapted. You developed these patterns for good reasons. They helped you survive circumstances that were genuinely difficult, or painful, or dangerous. And they're still trying to help you now. Your brain thinks it's protecting you. It just doesn't realize that what used to keep you safe is now keeping you stuck. So the work isn't about getting rid of the self-sabotage. It's about understanding it, thanking it for trying to help, and then consciously choosing something different. It's about building new patterns, new neural pathways, new ways of being that serve your current life instead of your past wounds. And here's what nobody tells you about that process. It's going to feel wrong for a long time. Not acting on the urge to sabotage will feel reckless. Letting things go well will feel dangerous. Being vulnerable will feel like you're inviting disaster, because you're going against every instinct, every survival strategy, every pattern your brain has relied on, and your nervous system will fight you. It will create anxiety and doubt and intrusive thoughts telling you that you're making a mistake, that you should go back to what's familiar, that this new way isn't safe. But if you can stay with it, if you can keep choosing differently even when it feels wrong, eventually your nervous system catches up. Eventually, the new patterns start to feel normal. Eventually, success and connection and happiness stop feeling like threats and start feeling like home. But that takes time. Months, years, maybe a lifetime of practice. And that's okay, because you're not trying to become a different person. You're trying to become more fully yourself. The self that exists underneath the self-sabotage. The self that wants good things and believes, maybe just a little bit, that you deserve them. You're going to have good stretches, weeks or months where you're making healthy choices, where you're not sabotaging, where you actually feel like you've figured it out. And then something will happen. A stressor, a trigger, a moment of vulnerability, and the old pattern will resurface. You'll cancel plans when you start to feel close to someone. You'll procrastinate on the important project. You'll pick a fight with your partner. And in that moment, it's easy to feel like you've lost all your progress, like you're back to square one, like nothing you've learned matters. But that's not true, because this time, you notice. This time, you recognize what you're doing. This time, you can choose to stop mid-sabotage instead of letting it run its course. Or even if you don't stop it, even if you let it happen, you understand why. And that understanding, that awareness, that's progress too. Living with self-sabotaging tendencies means accepting that they'll probably always be there in some form. They're your nervous system's default response to threat. And yes, you can rewire some of that. You can build new responses. But in moments of extreme stress or fear, your brain might still reach for the old familiar pattern. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. It means old patterns are deeply ingrained and take time to change. It means you're doing hard work, and hard work doesn't have a linear trajectory. You're going to need people who understand this about you, who can recognize when you're self-sabotaging and call you on it gently, who can remind you of your patterns when you're too activated to see them yourself, who can hold space for you to be scared and messy and contradictory without giving up on you. And finding those people is hard, because most people don't have the patience or the awareness or the willingness to deal with someone who keeps shooting themselves in the foot. But they're out there. Therapists, yes, but also friends who've done their own work, partners who understand that love isn't just about the good times, communities built around growth and healing. You need witnesses, people who see all of you, including the parts that sabotage, and choose to stay anyway. You're going to have to grieve what self-sabotage has cost you. The relationships it ended, the opportunities it closed, the time it took, The version of your life that might have been if you hadn't spent so long working against yourself. That grief is real and valid and important. You don't have to pretend it doesn't matter. You don't have to be grateful for the lessons or silver lining it. You can just be sad about what you lost. And then, when you're ready, you can choose to focus on what's still possible, on the relationships you haven't ruined yet, on the opportunities still in front of you, on the life you can build from here. Living with self-sabotaging tendencies means developing a relationship with the part of you that sabotages, not trying to kill it or suppress it or hate it into submission, but understanding it, listening to it, because it's trying to tell you something. It's trying to protect you. It's just using outdated methods based on outdated information. So you can talk to that part. Because you can say, "Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I know you're scared, but we're not in danger anymore. We can handle this. We can try something different." And sometimes that part will relax, will trust you to take the lead. And sometimes it won't. Sometimes it will panic and take over anyway. And that's okay. You're not at war with yourself. You're learning to parent the scared parts of you, to be the adult they needed when they were formed. You're going to have to redefine success, because if success means never sabotaging again, you're setting yourself up for failure. Success is sabotaging less frequently. Success is recognizing it sooner. Success is being able to repair the damage instead of letting it destroy everything. Success is having one bad week instead of one bad year. Success is giving yourself compassion instead of shame when it happens. Success is getting back up and trying again instead of deciding you're hopeless. Those are real victories. Those are meaningful changes. And they count. You're going to have moments where you wonder if it's worth it, where the work of constantly monitoring yourself, constantly choosing differently, constantly sitting with discomfort instead of acting on it, feels exhausting, where you think maybe it would be easier to just accept that you're someone who sabotages and stop fighting it. And in those moments, you have to remember why you started. Remember what self-sabotage costs you. Remember that staying stuck isn't actually easier. It just feels more familiar. And familiar isn't the same as good. Living with self-sabotaging tendencies is about acceptance and effort in equal measure. Accepting that this is part of your psychological makeup while making the effort to not let it run your life. Accepting that you'll never be perfect while working to be better. Accepting that you'll have bad days while committing to trying again tomorrow. It's a both-and kind of existence. You are someone who self-sabotages, and you are someone who's working on it. Both are true. And both deserve compassion. The goal isn't to become someone who never struggles. It's to become someone who struggles and doesn't give up, who sabotages and repairs, who falls down and gets back up, who sees their patterns and chooses differently most of the time, and forgives themselves when they don't. That's what growth looks like. Not perfection, not some mythical future where you've transcended all your issues. Just you, more aware, more skilled, more compassionate with yourself, doing your best, and knowing that your best will look different on different days. So here we are. You now understand why you self-sabotage. You know about defense mechanisms and core beliefs and attachment patterns and cognitive dissonance and secondary gains and the fear of success and all the intricate psychological machinery that conspires to make you work against your own interests. And maybe that feels overwhelming. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, great, now I know exactly how complicated this is. But you're not broken. You're human. You're a human being with a history, with wounds, with a nervous system that's trying its best to keep you safe, using strategies that made sense once, but don't serve you anymore. Self-sabotage isn't random. It's not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you don't really want what you say you want. It's a response to fear. Fear of failure. Yes. But more often, fear of success. Fear of being seen. Fear of outgrowing your old identity. Fear of losing the familiar pain you've organized your life around. Fear of discovering that you can have good things and keep them, which would mean you'd have to admit that all those years of suffering were, at least partially, in your control. And that's terrifying, because if you can change it now, why didn't you change it before? And the answer is, You weren't ready. You didn't know how. You were doing your best with the tools you had. But now you have more tools. Now you have awareness. And awareness, while not sufficient, is necessary. You can't change what you can't see. And now you've seen it. You've seen your patterns. You've seen why you do what you do. You've seen that the part of you that sabotages isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you. It's just bad at its job, and you can start working with it instead of against it. The work ahead isn't easy. It's uncomfortable and slow and non-linear. You'll mess up. You'll sabotage again. You'll disappoint yourself. But you'll also have moments where you catch yourself, where you choose differently, where you let something good stay good, where you sit with the discomfort instead of acting on it. And those moments, strung together over months and years, add up to a different life. Not a perfect life, but a more honest one, a more whole one. A life where you're not constantly working against yourself, where you're not your own worst enemy, where you can want something and actually let yourself have it. And maybe that's not as dramatic as some final breakthrough where you're healed and fixed and never struggle again. But it's real, it's possible, and it's enough. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing for more content like this. And remember, understanding why you self-sabotage doesn't make it your fault. It just makes it something you can work with, something you can change, one choice at a time, one moment of choosing differently, one instance of catching yourself and trying again. That's how change happens. Not dramatically, just consistently. Just by showing up and doing the work, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So go do the work, be patient with yourself, get help if you need it, and keep trying, because you deserve a life that isn't defined by self-sabotage. You deserve to want things and have them. You deserve to be happy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. You deserve to succeed without immediately destroying it. And the fact that you watched this entire video, that you're willing to look at these patterns, that you're trying to understand yourself better, that's already evidence that you're capable of change, that you're ready, that maybe, just maybe, you're tired of being your own worst enemy and you're willing to try something different. And that's where it starts.